This is the Comics Alternative Kickstarter, discovering Nick's Comics and their 2018 releases. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative Kickstarter. This is the weekly series where I talk with a comics creator or creative team who's currently doing something on Kickstarter. And this week I have the pleasure of talking with Ken Epstein. His Kickstarter campaign right now, because he's had several in the past, is one for Nick's Comics 2018 comic book and records subscription. Ken, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Derek. How are you?
I'm doing really well as well. Now, let's let our listeners know I didn't just pick you out of a hat. You're someone whom I have been corresponding with for quite a number of years now. I can't remember when you first got in touch with me, but you've shared some of your own work with me, the Buck Slaughter and then Nick's Comics Quarterly, your flagship title. But also we've met up at SPX before.
Yeah, that's right. And I think I can actually put a date on it. I think I met you shortly after I met Andy Kunka at ICAF, the year that the Billy Ireland Cartoon Library opened up in their new digs.
Yeah, well, that's when we met each other at SPX. But before that, we had introduced ourselves to one another via email.
Oh, gosh. Okay. I guess I'm bad.
Yeah, and then that's when you alerted us to Nick's Comics.
Yeah, I'm always alerting people to Nick's Comics. That's kind of the nature of being a small press guy, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, on the topic of Nick's Comics, let's get to what your Kickstarter is all about.
Sure. I had a kind of an off year last year where I just put out a couple of zines and an issue of the Buck Slaughter, which is the one comic that I illustrate and write myself as opposed to getting collaborators with. But previous to that, I'd always tried to get out 4 or 5 comic books a year as Nick's Comics. I started in 2011, so I have a good record of about 20, 30 publications under my belt at this point. This year, I kind of wanted to do something special. I had a couple of opportunities. My friend Kent, who had done the cover for Nick's Comics Quarterly number 6, and he's a local Columbus painter, rock musician, poet, wanted me to do a collection of his haiku paired with illustrations, which appealed to me from the perspective of kind of pushing the boundaries of what a comic is, to doing my third and final comic with my friend Bela based on his experiences as a record store person in the 90s in Columbus and about his kind of departed friends. And then, kind of get back to my basics as well, of doing horror comics and Western comics and humor comics. So I had a hunger this year. and this Kickstarter is kind of a manifestation of that hunger to get back to what I love doing. And for making the comic books that I would want to read is the idea.
Yeah. So for your planned 2018 release schedule, and so what this Kickstarter covers, that's 5 comics, 2 zines, 2 records, and 1 art book. Is that correct?
That sounds right. I think that's what I wrote down.
Yeah. That's really ambitious.
It is ambitious, but it's I have a lot of faith in the people I collaborate with. I think that the ambitious part of it is finding enough people who are interested in picking up on this stuff to make it worth everybody's while. It's kind of some of the most charismatic people I know and interesting people I know are working on these comic books with me. And it's not always easy to convey that to the outside world that you should pick this up because there are special people making these. But that's kind of where the ambition comes from. Is it's not just a personal thing. I want to show people what my community is all about.
Now, this is by far not your first Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah, no, not at all. I did one. The first one I did was in 2011 for my very first comic, the Nick's Comics Quarterly, which is that horror and humor book that's kind of wrapped in the sweater of being a garage rock comic. And I literally hadn't heard of it at the time. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, have you seen this Kickstarter thing? You should do it." So I did it, and ran a small Kickstarter for that first issue, and it worked. And I wasn't planning on ever doing one again, except when I was getting ready to do my second issue, people were like, "Hey, where's the Kickstarter?" And things kind of unfolded from there. It's in your interview with Dan Stafford, he talked about how it's kind of become the marketplace for the micro presses and small presses. And I think in some ways that's really right.
I think this is the first instance of someone on a Kickstarter episode that I've done referenced another Kickstarter episode where I talked with another creator. So congratulations, my friend.
Well, I want Dan's to succeed. A lot of good people, speaking of like a community of a lot of good and talented people who deserve to get their work out there. He's representing them. We're very much coming from the same ethos there. Yeah,
you're right. And in fact, when you put this up, a couple of weeks ago or so, I noticed that, it is very much like what Dan does with Kilgore, is that, you're looking for funding to help you with not just a season's worth of comics, but, this year's plans of records and comics.
Well, there's a little bit of necessity to that, because you can only go to the crowdfunding well so often. Like I made it sound like people expect a Kickstarter with every issue that you put out, but in fact, people get tired of it pretty quickly if you're just always on the make for money from them in that fashion. So it only makes sense to kind of condense it into one swing for the fences,
Right. And then that makes sense. Now, a moment ago, you mentioned something about Nick's Comics when you founded it a number of years ago. You wanted it to be the kind of comics that you'd enjoyed. So if there are any of our listeners who are, unfortunately, unfamiliar with what you do, how would you describe Nick's Comics to the uninitiated?
They're comic books that are informed by garage rock, punk rock, and record store culture and B movies. And that doesn't make them unique in and of itself, except that I very much do stuff that would be more at home, usually in, say, a record store in their literature section, as opposed to a comic book store. So, I have a zine writing background. I've contributed to a ton of zines in the past, and I think it comes through a lot that my influences are more John Holmstrom than Jack Kirby. So I think that it definitely appeals to a lot of people who don't consider themselves comics people, which is weird, I guess, being on a comics podcast and saying. but if there's something that if there's an idea that I kind of want to take behind the Circle K and beat up a little bit, it's this notion of comic book people. Because I think that, the people who aren't comic book people just haven't seen the right one yet.
Now, I want to make sure that I'm clear and our listeners know what specific titles you plan on producing in 2018. This will be Nick's Comics Quarterly number 10, Nick's Western Comics number 4, Buck Slaughter's Book of Rock and Roll Facts number 3, Tales from the Crate number 4, Return of Belligerent Kitties, and then Beauty Found in Darkness, along with 2 7-inch singles by Jenny May and Jerry Wick, and then the Collected Panda Bear. Is that correct?
That sounds right. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's all 7 of them, I guess. And then the 7 inches come as like comic and record sets. So you can either get the Jenny May and Jerry Wick book or the Panda Bear book as comics alone, or you can get them with the 7-inch records, which, aren't meant to be a soundtrack per se, but definitely are meant to enhance your appreciation of the comics.
Oh, speaking of soundtracks, I do want to mention that I do like the music in the background of your promotional video on the Kickstarter page.
That's another Nick's Comics production there.
Yep.
That's by Bob Ray Starker and Pete English, and it was the B-side to Nick's the record that came with Nick's Western Comics #1. So that's a little bit of local flavor, and it's also part of when I talk about like my stuff appealing to the record store crowd. Bob Starker is a local musician first and a comic artist second in a lot of ways. He's a super well respected performer here in town. So early on, when I was looking to get the feel I wanted, I tried to find as many people that I could who were both musicians and comic artists, or who did record covers or gig posters and that kind of thing, but also did comic books. And that's kind of carried through to today. I still have a lot of those people on who aren't pure comics artists.
And that's cool. So when people visit your current Kickstarter campaign, that page, not only will they get visual samples of what you do, but also that auditory example through the video.
Yep, and actually, if you scroll down, there's actually snippets of the 2 7-inches as well.
Oh yeah, so I see those now. Yeah, okay, so
you can give those a listen as well. I wanted to actually do the full songs, but I guess the Kickstarter audio thing has a free download aspect to it, where you can just download whatever's there. So I cheesed people a little bit there by only doing about a minute of each song.
Well, let's talk about the various reward levels that you've set up.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so now you've got a number of these. Let's break them down into what you think would be the most doable, the most popular, or what listeners may be the most interested in.
I gotcha. Well, there are options to get any one individual issue or any individual comic and record set for just $4 or $12 plus shipping. Which is kind of a nice way to lend a little support, but not, feel like you've committed to this big giant thing. And I think if people were going to do that, I'd recommend either getting the Jerry Wick and Jenny May record set or Nick's Comics Quarterly, because those are the two that probably most exemplify like what I want to do. And what I think people like about what I do. Mm-hmm. I offer 2 subscription options, which I think are fairly reasonably priced. One is for $25 plus a little bit for shipping. You get all of the comics and zines. So that's the 6 titles, not counting the big art book and not counting any records. And that's, you'll get something in the mail every month for 3 months, which is kind of fun. Mm-hmm. And then there's a deluxe one where you'll also get the art book and the records and everything. So that's pretty wild. I like that one. Most recently, Bela from Anyway Records, who wrote the Jenny May Jerry Wick book, showed up at a comics fair I was at yesterday, a comics fair I was running, and he had a bag of Anyway Records, and he said, "Hey, just make some rewards out of these." So you could get the Jenny May comic and record plus her original LP. There's a bar around the corner, assholes, which is just a great indie rock record. So some of those are really fun and a good way to get a lot of music cheap.
And the deadline for backing this Kickstarter is Sunday, April 15th at 1:38 p.m. So that's Sunday, April 15th. 1:38 p.m. and this is Eastern Daylight Time. Yep.
After that, assuming that it goes through, or I guess even if it doesn't go through, I'll be moving subscription and individual title pre-orders to my mail order website. But the prices, of course, will go up. The idea behind this Kickstarter isn't so much looking for donations as much as giving people an opportunity to do some pre-ordering at a discount rate.
Right. And if people wanted to find out more about Nick's Comics in general, they can go to your website, Nick's Comics, and that is NIXCOMICS.com, correct?
Yep, that's a good way to start. And then on Facebook, it's and Twitter and Instagram. It's at Nick's Comics, just all one word run together.
Okay. So again, this Kickstarter campaign, which is for your 2018 comic book and record output, will end on Sunday, April 15th at 1:38 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I recommend all of our listeners check out not only this Kickstarter, but also your website as well, if they don't already know about Nick's Comics.
Sounds great.
Well, Ken, I want to thank you again for being on the Comics Alternative Kickstarter show, and I wish you the best of luck on your current Kickstarter, which is the backing of Nick's Comics' 2018 comic book and record releases. And, we're going to end this episode with not our usual outro music, but with a song from Jerry Wick, Love, Death, and Photosynthesis.
Yeah, this is actually the B-side of the record that we have for the Jenny May and Jerry Wick comic book. And it was originally released by Anyway Records on their I Stayed Up All Night Listening to Records CD compilation. So it's a pretty cool song, and I hope people enjoy it.
Yeah, well, thanks. I will be back next week with another comics-related Kickstarter campaign. Until then, everyone have a nice weekend. Dead soldiers get to say hey, and you pull me up and you're dead, girl. Yeah, you're dead, girl. I'm lost in these dead souls, and I'm thinking about everything. It's all wrong. Yeah, it's all wrong. Oh, God, now. Things just seem to go ways when you rob everything you see. Things just seem to blow away. Is there anything to breathe in this dead world when you're gone? Anything will grow when you're gone. Anything will grow in your place. In this book of visionaries, we seem to think it'll blow and it'll blow. One chance to save her wings, one chance to save her wings. She went off in the deep end. Now she's gone. Things seem to go away when you rob everything you see. Things just seem to throw away. Is there anything to breathe in this dead world when you're gone? Anything will grow when you're gone. Anything will grow in your place. Will I feel anyway? When I think of you, I start to sing. Sometimes I like it here. I feel it every time you are here. Dead soldiers get to sing. Oh, you look me in the eye and I'm dead, girl.